Welcome to Athletes and Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a centralized platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect and tap into various resources in business and health. But more importantly, this show is all about athlete transition out of sports. It's a major issue today, whether it's financial literacy, mental health. So we interview former collegiate professional athletes and we talk about their journey into successful entrepreneurship or business leadership. And the whole idea is to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. So excited today to have Jim Ayres on. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Rob, for having me. I appreciate it.
It's a true pleasure. So Jim was a college football player at Grand Valley. And then when he graduated, he was a biochemistry major and he got into being a chemist at the Amway Corporation. Through the years, worked his way up into executive positions into research. Ultimately, he was the managing director of Amway North America, pretty big position, huge company in Michigan. And now today, he's just kind of semi-retired, but he's consulting, working with nonprofits, enjoying the family, which is fantastic. So, Jim, I always like to talk about when you were growing up playing sports, how did that shape you leading up into college?
Well, I could talk for a long time about that, Rob. So my dad. This is a seminal moment for me in my life. Was my father passed away when I was 9 years old. He was 41, died of a heart attack unexpectedly. We lost our home. My mom, had a job, but we moved in with my grandparents, with her parents, and it was also we lived. I initially grew up in Southwest Michigan, in the middle of nowhere on a lake, it just farm country, and all of a sudden I'm in the downtown of Kalamazoo, Michigan, which is a decent sized city. It was a really traumatic thing for me, and I was 9 at the time, but I struggled a lot with just finding my way and who I was and having the courage to move forward. And, I started playing football, organized football in junior high. I think it was seventh or eighth grade. And that just immediately, between the demands of it, the challenge of it, and probably most importantly, the coaches, just that was my North Star. They pointed me in a different direction. I was in a very bad neighborhood. A number of guys that I grew up with ended up in prison, and a few of us didn't, but we played sports, and so that was the first big thing that just set me on a path towards being my best. And I fell down a lot, but that was the impetus that got me going in a good direction, basically. And it was kind of like somebody threw me a life preserver, I guess, and yeah, it changed my life. It really, really did.
And any dreams of being a professional football player, playing in the NFL when you were playing?
Sure. But when you realize that you're not big enough and you're not fast enough, then that kind of goes away. uh, yeah. I guess one of the biggest lessons that I learned through playing football through high school and through college at Grand Valley State, where I was, relatively successful. I played. I was a offensive lineman back in the day. But what I really learned was what I had as an advantage and how I could be successful. And if I'm just going to tell you really, really quick, I'll try to make a quick story. I think it was seventh or eighth grade, the first year I played organized football. And we were practicing on the field behind the school. And the field was really rough, didn't have a lot of grass, had a lot of gravel, a lot of dirt. I remember at the time, I was like the third string fullback, I think, and in practice. So the scrub squad, I remember this, and playing against the first string defense, of course. I wasn't very big. And they handed me the ball in practice. I run up the middle. I run into 3 giant defensive first string linemen that nobody blocked. And they literally face planted me into the gravel. And it actually broke my face mask, or it made it
Oof.
come down. It was like only a 2-bar face mask. That's how long ago it was. And it ended up down here. And I had a bloody nose, bloody lips, and I was kind of like literally picking the mud and the stones out of my face. I got totally face planted. And I'll never forget, I went back to the huddle, fixed my face mask. And it's kind of that, you talk about the fight or flight response. For me, it was just like fight. I mean, I became really, really like just angry and just totally motivated to not let that happen, and not, that's, that's not going to happen again, and give me the ball. And I was just almost like kind of fanatical. And I remember yelling at the scrub team saying, come on, guys. I mean, let's go. I mean, and just really pumped up. And I did that for the rest of that practice. It never left me. And I did it the next day and the next day. And about, I want to say 2 weeks later, I was playing. I was playing tight end, which was just blocking because we didn't pass the ball at that stage. But I played, and it occurred to me that I wasn't the biggest or the fastest or the most talented, but I made the coaches play me because of my effort and my attitude. And that never left me. And even when I was at GVSU in college, that attitude was there. I was the first one to practice every day. I psyched up for practice just like it was a game for like an hour before practice. And like when I was on the field in drills, first one in line. I mean, hustle, 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 hustle. And, I ended up playing because of that attitude, I think. And then that translated, I learned that I may not be as big or faster, maybe in a business sense or whatever, not as smart as the other guys, the other people, but I can out hustle anybody. And that was the story of my success in business, frankly. And it all came from that thing that happened to me in seventh grade, getting face planted.
It's amazing that it's that one event that catapulted. I mean, I was kind of like that. I was a runner in high school and college, and I was like the underdog. And back when, well, it was before I started college, but like the whole Rocky thing, and that's the way I kind of saw myself all the time, and having a little bit of a chip on my shoulder that
Yeah.
people didn't think as much of me. So to your point, like just different sport, but having to hustle more and have more heart and more determination, to do that. So yeah, that's important. It definitely shapes you leading into school. So one thing we talk about, and kind of the theme of the podcast is just athletes transitioning out of sports, and usually the same answer, but when you were at Grand Valley State, were there programs to kind of address life after sports, or if not, then did you see stuff now? Because I know you're still involved with the school.
Yeah, there was really nothing at all when I was there. And I mean, I wasn't a model student like for all of that, but I was a good student at the end. But I mean, no, when I got out of school, um, I had to go find a job. And that's what it was. I had to go find a job. And luckily, I latched onto a great global corporation that was big enough that I had tons of opportunity. I stayed there for 41 years until I retired in 2020. But I was kind of on my own. I don't know that at Grand Valley today that there's an organized kind of mentorship program, and I think there's actually a big spot for that, to tell you the truth, because I think not just with football, but I mean, all men and women athletes at any level are learning amazing things about life skills. They're competing, and many of them just you know, have no guidance about where they want to go or what they want to do. And I think I've long thought connecting those people with people who have gone through it and experienced it and maybe to some extent figured it out is like, could be really, really, really valuable.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I think a lot of what we talk about, I talk to different schools, is just kind of an approach of bringing a team of different, and we talked a little bit offline about it, just having, whether it be the people in the financial space or people in the career space, health people, because there's just such a big problem with athletes today, especially, I think, and you can't just pinpoint it to like football, but when you get into some of the bigger schools too, the Division 1, it's like you're so drilled in as an athlete, and it could be any sport, but you're drilled in that you're kind of just all of a sudden it's done, and very few make it professionally, and then you're kind of like, okay, well, I'm Jim the football player, I'm Rob the runner, Susie the swimmer, and you identify yourself as the athlete and not as this person that has many years ahead of you. So I think it is important for schools to start looking at that, or working together, and educating the athletes. And
Yeah.
it kind of tied into, you touched on it, is bringing in former athletes. So like from an alumni perspective, and obviously Alumni Direct, that's big with us, but like, what was there moments where alumni were coming back to mentor? And I don't know, I know you were in football, but like maybe across other sports as well.
No, I had none of that at all. I mean, the only, I mean, the mentorship that I received throughout my whole athletics career was really from coaches, many of whom had gone through the program and most of whom had played at some point or another, whether it was at our school or at a different school. And some of them had. I mean, my high school football coach played for the Cleveland Browns for a few years, and another one of my coaches in high school played for the defensive back for the Philadelphia Eagles. So, I mean, they made it big time. They didn't really talk in high school much about like life after what's next and everything, but they were very, very diligent about the lessons and the just the discipline and dedication, the things that regardless of where you go would make you successful, not so much where you're going, but this is how you get there.
Right. No, and I think I think it's a two-way street. I mean, obviously, like the schools can ask, athletes to come back, and the athletes need to want to come back. And we'll do a quick shout out to Jim's coach, athletic director Tim Selga, who was on our podcast this week's episode. Actually, that it was dropped today when as we're speaking. But I think to have those athletes come back, because you kind of relate to it, right? For the school to say, hey Jim, come back, and if you don't mind, and maybe talk to some of the other football players, or for that matter, really any of the athletes in general. It could be baseball, could be basketball, soccer, whatever. But just showing them, you've had this athletic career, and now you went through this whole career, but just tapping into that mentorship.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I like about your ideas and your kind of what you're trying to do is I think it's important. So it's needed. We all agree it's needed. I think it's important to be very intentional about it, because if you're not, it probably won't happen very much. I'll give you an example. I met one of the coaches at Grand Valley State a couple of years ago at the alumni golf outing, and got to know him, and he's a friend of mine now. He's actually the head coach now there, but like talking to him, getting to know him, and him hearing my story, he really was high on the idea of, man, I want you to come back and talk to our athletes, because I mean, they could be very accomplished in what they're doing, but they want to be you someday. And
Right.
they don't know that they can be, right? They don't really necessarily believe that they can be you someday. And I want you to come tell your story. So the energy for it is there. It's never happened. And it's never happened because of how busy coaches are, players are. Especially in college football, as you know, these days, it's more crazy and busy and hectic than it's ever been. I mean, I can't imagine being a head college football coach in today's world. It's just nuts, even at the D2 level. And so, I think it would be so great if there was more of an organized program around it, because then you plan on it and you know what's going to happen and you see the benefit from it. And I mean, man, I could go there and they could bring in 10 more people like me, or somebody who successfully played, volleyball, whatever. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's needed. I think because the athletes are looking up to that. And not only, we talk about the current athletes, but, also just even the alumni athletes that, ones that struggle, maybe they've been out for a year or 2 or 5 years and they just don't know where to go. And I think to see some of the success stories of these athletes, and you kind of started touching on, we talked a little bit about just that whole athlete skill set, the DNA. So let's talk a little bit about that, and especially in your years in executive leadership and all that. Is that something that companies seek out?
Well, I think they should. I know I did. I started in management probably a few years out of college. I started like as a supervisor, then a manager. But in my executive roles, I led big organizations. Amway North America was $1 billion when I was running it. So, and you learn pretty quick, just like with athletics, the talent you bring in and cultivate and support is everything. Strategy, you could have a great strategy, just like in sports. If you use a sports metaphor, you could have great facilities, you could have great fan base, all this stuff. You could have a great game plan. If you don't have the right players in the right spots with a lot of talent and they're pointed in the right direction, you will not win. It's the exact same thing in business. And so I was taught that early on in my business career, and I believed it. I believe it in my core. We always talked about the war for talent. We always talked about simple concepts like first who, then what. Don't worry about what till you got the who.
Right.
And, as I recruited and hired talented people, I thought athletics background was often a tipping point because I might have a number of really, really talented people. And if they were all basically equal, very equivalent, I didn't, sometimes there was something else with somebody, but a lot of times if I looked and I saw somebody played athletics, and it could have been, one young lady I hired was, I had a number of great candidates, but she was the captain of her high school volleyball team. That tells me something, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're doing athletics, obviously you learn about yourself, you learn how to push yourself, you learn how to be a great teammate, you learn how to adapt, you learn how to win, you learn how to lose. And, to me, it's just training for life, for success in life. We did some with another client that I worked with in my consulting business was a big school district here in West Michigan. And they were looking at how do they get their students better trained for what's next in the world of work. And as part of that, we went out and talked to a number of employers in the area here. One of the main things that came across from virtually all the employers, is it's almost like if you ask them, what's one thing you want from somebody coming out of school, whether it's high school or college, and you're going to hire into your workplace and your business, it's resilience. They want people that are resilient because you know what? Things are not going to go great all the time. Bad things are going to happen. Things are going to fail. Trouble will come. And we want people to know how to handle that, can pick themselves up and focus on how, to turn that around. And, that's a description of playing athletics and competing,
Right.
right? And nothing goes your way all the time. I don't care. It didn't for Tiger Woods. I don't care who you are. It
Yeah.
doesn't. And you learn resilience. In my case, I started learning resilience from that day that I got face planted in seventh
Yeah.
grade. Those are lessons that never leave you. And I think that that's one of the most powerful things that you get when you actually play athletics and compete.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, even, talking to other podcast guests, we talked to one guy and he's a CEO for a couple Fortune 500 companies. And he talked about it too. He implored athletes, look, don't sell yourself short. I mean, people want to, work together with you and you've got the skills and the leadership and everything else that goes with it. So it kind of leads me to my next question. Let's talk about networking, connecting, and just talk about the importance of that, and especially while you're still playing.
Yeah. To me, one of the most important things that anybody can do, not just for their career, but just in general, is networking. um, Even maybe even more, especially while you're playing, because when you're playing and you're in school and or maybe you're done professionally, but you're kind of in a bit of a bubble, and it's going from college, even successful college, to a business career or a teaching career, whatever it is. That's kind of a different world, and if you have no contacts, no support mechanisms or anything from that area you want to go to, you're at a pretty significant disadvantage in my mind. I think at any stage, networking is a best practice for me. I found it to be one of the most important things that I've ever done. I do believe that it's something that not everybody's comfortable with. But even if you are comfortable with it, I think you've got to be, like I said before, intentional about it, because it oftentimes gets shuttled off to the side because of everything else you got going on, whether it's schoolwork or business work or family or whatever. Got to be intentional about it. What I did with my administrative support person that was my partner through my career was that we set aside Friday morning every week for networking. I did other networking beyond this, but if I did nothing else, I did that every Friday morning. And we had a list of, I think, a couple of times a year, we sat down and made a list of a few dozen, maybe 50 people that it was important that I knew that I didn't interact with on a regular basis. And she'd go down the list, and every Friday morning I had breakfast with somebody different and I got to know them. And then we'd have repeats, right? And I built so many relationships that way. It was number one, it was great to get to know people and people got to know me. Number two, I learned a lot when I'm talking to my counterpart from marketing or the person who ran manufacturing about what their issues are, what their big challenges are. That's great information for me to have. And I learned a ton about the business and my counterparts. And then the other thing is like, it's a lot easier to handle the tough things, the emergencies or the problems, and to be resilient when you've got people that you can count on in adjacent areas that you can work together with. And the basis for that, the currency of that is relationships. And those relationships, there's no easy way to do it. And for me, it was all face to face. I mean, you can probably do it digitally now as well,
Right.
but just putting the time and energy into putting yourself out there and getting to know people, and just being genuine is like it's worth its weight in gold.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's good. Just great advice there on
Mm.
networking. I love the idea too of putting together that list and the every Friday thing that works out pretty well. And I think it's where the sometimes the athletes miss. And I'm talking to one agent, and this pretty much same conversation comes up on most of the podcast. But just saying that while they're still playing and relevant, to be able to make those connections in the networking, because when they're done, when it's time to get a job, like if they haven't done that, and a lot of athletes don't, and so all of a sudden they're whether it's the job or whatever else it might be, they're not just it's not the door's just not open for them. They might expect it to be open for them, but not so much. And I think
Right.
it's important. I even talk about going back to high school, and just you've got your teammates and their parents and coaches and all along the way. Man, for me, I kind of make it a little bit of a game in a fun way, and I mean that's way for athletes to look at it too, is that make networking, connecting kind of game and a challenge, just like you do on the field, is just a challenge to maybe get out of your comfort zone. And I think the biggest key, like you brought up too, is being genuine. I think that's so important. It's just you can't. Yeah, I always try to take that approach of not what's in it for me, but how can I help somebody else? And then, you hope in the world of karma that comes back. Now, I would say I just wonder, like, if you went back to those guys that knock you down, like what they're doing today, would they be like, oh my God, Jim, we're so sorry. Hey, let's connect.
Yeah, who knows? But I've encountered, it's not unusual for people to feel intimidated or
Yeah,
reluctant to just reach out to somebody and say, "Hey, Rob, can we get together next week? I mean, I'd like to just get to know you better." They feel like they've got to have a reason,
yeah,
and you really don't. And what I have found is I have never met anybody, and all those people that I've met and networked with, that like if I didn't start by telling them about me. I would start by asking them about them. I was genuinely interested in
yeah,
them, trying to figure out who they are. What do they care about? What are their big things? And just generally be curious to get to know somebody. People respond to that. And they want to tell you that stuff. And if they think that they can, through their story, help you out, I never met anybody who didn't want to help. I
yeah,
mean, it's human nature. So I understand the reluctance, but I've found that if you just it's like anything. The first couple times you ride a bike, it's really scary, but after a while, it's no big deal, and you're going all over the place. It's the same thing. Just put yourself out there and start doing it. And it's like I said, it's probably one of the most important things that I've done, and I still do it all the time. It's not every Friday morning now, but I'm
right,
still. I mean, I was at a big community event last week, and I was at a big table with a business leader in the West Michigan area, and just talked to him for a few minutes, over the dinner and everything at this event. And when it was over, I just before we both left, I went up and just kind of shook his hand. And I said, "Hey, nice to meet you. Here's my card. I want to get to know you better. Can we get together?" And he's like, "Oh, I'd love to." And now we're going to meet, I think, in the next 2 weeks, because I'm like, I can learn a lot from that guy. I mean, he ran some big manufacturing company or
yeah.
something, but I just want to get to know him. I think he'd be fun to get to know. I'm going to learn a ton, and he'll be another great connection for me at some point, right?
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. I mean, I like that approach too. Like, hey, let's just get together. I mean, you're right. So many people are intimidated by it and they just don't want to do it. So I always have my two fun questions of the episode. So the first one is, what advice would you give to freshman Jim?
In college,
Yeah, college. Yeah,
go to class. So, Rob, I got recruited to play football at Grand Valley. After my first semester, my GPA was 0.8. I never went to class. I played football. I partied. I had a great time. I worked out and I flunked out. And I actually got kicked out of school. I went back home with my tail between my legs, worked in a gas station in a pretty rough part of Kalamazoo for the summer, or actually the winter and the summer. And I applied to get back into Grand Valley State. And for some unknown reason, it's a miracle, they let me back in. No scholarship or anything, but I got back in. And all I did from that point through all of my undergrad, grad school at Western Michigan University, and my MBA at Davenport University, I never missed a class. And I showed up and I paid attention and I got straight A's. It's not that difficult if you show up and pay attention, I realized, and I was just too dumb to know that when I was a freshman in college.
Yeah, I think that's probably a lot of people have that same freshman syndrome. So now, well, fast forward, what advice would you give to senior Jim?
What I think, senior in college?
Yeah, senior in college, yeah.
Senior in college, probably the advice that I needed to hear that I didn't hear was to be more proactive and think farther down the road than I did. I was very much about today. I got great marks in school, but essentially I got my degree and I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, but I wasn't gotten into a graduate school yet, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I got caught where I basically woke up after I graduated and thought, darn, I got to get a job. And I started looking for a job. Well, that's kind of like chasing your tail, right? I mean, in hindsight, I could have had that all set up 6 months to a year in advance if I really had been intentional about it and thought about it and put some effort into it. And I was just kind of going by the seat of the pants. I have no regrets about anything. I learned lessons from all the things that I did great and the things I screwed up. And, I guess another advice that I had that I kind of learned was to kind of go with the flow. And it's okay to go with the flow. I wanted to be a paleontologist, study dinosaur stuff. I got accepted into Northern Arizona University for a graduate degree in paleontology, working with a professor that was in the Grand Canyon digging up T-Rex bones and stuff. And it didn't work out. I had just gotten married to my first wife, and she didn't really want to go, so that all just fell through, and I got a job at Amway, and it all turned out just great. So
yeah, I guess things happen for reasons.
Things happen for a reason.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about you played football through high school and college, and when your time was up playing football, talk a little bit about your transition out of sport.
Well, my transition out of sports was unexpected and jarring. The first game of my senior year at GVSU, I had my knee blown out in a major way, major knee surgery. I was done. I was done in one day, right? Unexpectedly. I was looking forward to that senior year. And that was, jarring for at that age. I remember sitting, excuse me, while the game was still going on, sitting on the sidelines crying in my hands because of the shock of it, that it's over. But once I got past that relatively quickly, I was back into my studies, and I just put all my energy into my studies. And once I recovered, I was still active in athletics. I still am today. I do different athletics today than I did back then, but I've always been active physically. Whether I don't play basketball anymore, but I played a lot of basketball, did all kinds of things like that. And it's just, I kind of kept the fun part of sports and the fitness part of sports. And I took all those lessons and I applied them very consciously applied them to my career and to work. Because what I found is it's different nuts and bolts, but the principles of winning in a job or career or a business are very similar to principles of winning in an athletic event. And actually, I preach those all the time. One good example, when I led North America, like I said, $1 billion business, I would be in front of all the employees every, 5 weeks or so. We'd have an all employee meeting, hundreds of people. And, if it was a time when our numbers, the financials that you follow and everything were not growing like we wanted them to for whatever reason, and we would share those with everybody. But then my message after that was, hey, we'll keep you apprised of this, but don't worry about this stuff. We'll figure it out. We're doing the right stuff. It's going to come back. And the sports example I would use was if imagine that you're on the field, a soccer pitch, and you're in a World Cup soccer game. Stakes are really high. It's a big deal how you play to win this game. If you are on that field and you're staring at the scoreboard, you're in big trouble. Don't look at the scoreboard. Look at the ball. Play the game. Do it the way you've been trained to do it. And the score at the end of the game, we'll tell you, we can look at the scoreboard and see how it turned out. Don't worry about that. We got the right game plan, play the game. And, my big thing was, just focus every day on, and I learned this absolutely from sports and from all those, the drudgery of football practice was execute with excellence every single day. Execute with excellence. If you do that, great things happen. Right.
I like that. That's good. So, a couple words of advice for athletes, especially ones like yourself that might have an unfortunate injury that kind of ends that. Words of advice for them as they look to transition into, we'll call it the real world. I mean, a lot of people refer to that, but when they life after.
Well, for me it was pretty basic. And it kind of gets back to one of my leadership principles that I have today that I kind of really put together about 25 years ago, probably, frankly. But the number one thing I have only three things. The number one thing is confront reality. It is what it is. You can't
Yeah.
change it. It happened. Confront reality. And it's no different than, it's a different scale and a different impact, but it's still the same as if you're a lineman, you just got completely beat and the quarterback got smoked, right? It's the same thing. So what happens when that happened? Like, you kick yourself in the butt a little bit, you go back to the huddle and you figure out what you did wrong, and I'm going to beat the guy the next time, right? And you get back in the game. It's those principles that you learn, probably even more than in the games, in the daily practices, the grind of that, and the need, you learn to, even no matter how tired you are, how the missed block you just had, or you drop the ball, whatever it is, resilience, man. You're back in it. What am I going to do to change this, and how am I going to win the next play? And you do that thousands of times through your career. When it's something more major happens to you, it's the same principles. Magnitude's different, but it's the same thing. How am I going to pick
Yeah.
myself up, confront reality? How am I going to handle this and turn it into a positive? And whether it's a failure in a game or a practice, which is a relatively minor thing, or a major failure in life. Maybe you got fired, your company went out of business. I don't know what it is. The principle of, yeah, that happened. I'm not going to let this define me. How am I going to turn this around? And I'm not going to let this define me, and I'm going to pick myself up and get going and get back at it.
Yeah, no, that's great. So let's kind of wrap it up. Just talk about, so you got done in today's day, it's kind of rare to find the right company and be with them as long as you were with Amway, being there for over 40 years. So just talk about a little bit about that journey that ultimately led you to the to the leadership position that you're in.
Well, again, applying those same principles, I started at Amway as an hourly lab technician with a science degree, which was the lowest rung on the ladder. I'm doing all the grunt work in the laboratories, washing dishes, mixing some things up. And I, just like from coming from sports, I knew that I wanted more responsibility. Yeah, the money came with advancement, but I wasn't focused on the money. I wanted more responsibility, right? And I kind of wanted to win. And earlier in my career, when I was fresh out of school, I was probably, in hindsight, too competitive. I always wanted my boss's job. Like, I want to do that. One of the things I did, so my boss at that point was a salaried chemist. And I'm like, I want that job. And I was his technician. And one of the blessings I had was he was really, really lazy. So I just started doing his job for him. I'm like, hey, I'll do that. Hey, I'll do that. And before you know it, I was kind of doing the chemist's job, even though I was an hourly lab technician. I didn't get his job. He didn't get fired or anything, but I was able to demonstrate that I could do it, and I got promoted to it. And then I moved into management, and I just focused at every opportunity I had I focused on, frankly, in blunt language, kicking butt every single day. I was aggressive about doing the best I could, seeking out opportunities, not waiting to be told to do something, seeing something and going after it, just being aggressive about, well, it's the same thing as hustling, right? It's hustle, 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 hustle. When I was a chemist, I heard that marketing in Amway was looking at coming up with some new personal care product line. I don't remember what it was. All I had to do was hear the rumor that they were talking about that. I'm like, I want those products. I came in on the weekends. I formulated on my own a whole line of products. Then I got marketing together in a conference room and sold it to them. I mean, that's like maybe in hindsight a little too aggressive, but it's what I learned from the face plant. I mean, man, I'm going to hustle. I can out hustle everybody. Not the best chemist. I can out hustle everybody. And just having that attitude of, I'm going to kick butt, do my best. Whatever comes is going to come. I didn't worry about the money. I just wanted to excel in everything I did, and I pushed myself to do it. And I just think that attitude of not being satisfied, comfortable, and just, what can I say? Just like going after it, man. That's what my story was all about.
It's a great story, and it's a testament to. And I think obviously, like the theme of just that whole athlete mentality, and you brought that throughout your career. So, how can people find you? Like, if you had some some of these athletes who want to reach out to you, like on LinkedIn, or what's the best way?
Yeah, Jim Ayres, Ayres. I am on LinkedIn. You certainly can reach me that way. I will, Rob. I'll give you my email address that you can
Okay,
post out there as well
sure.
after this. That if and I encourage anybody out there wants to get a hold of me. I do a lot of just conversations with people that want to talk about things. I'm not, unless it's some big gig that you want me to sign up for, I'm not going to charge you to call me or anything like that. I'm happy to talk to you. Half an hour, 45 minutes. If I can help you, that's great. I want to do that stuff.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think it'd be definitely, I'm sure, entertaining conversation and very valuable conversations. And you can find us at alumnidirect.com. You can find us on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. And to find the show, we have our Alumni Direct YouTube channel, as well as we're across all the different podcast networks. Also, our friends at sportspreneur.com. We're on their platform with a bunch of other great podcasts too. So, Jim, this has been great. We really appreciate it, and look forward to getting some valuable lessons out to our viewers and listeners.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate the opportunity. Take care.
You're welcome. You too.